One can cover millions of kilometers in a lifetime and barely scratch the surface of the places one has seen, or learn little of the people one has just met. The deeper sense of traveling lays in stopping to listen to whoever has a story to tell. By walking, one learns more about life. By walking, people meet each other. By walking, the wounds of the day before are healed. Go walking to find a star, to hear a voice, if and when you meet the footprints of others. Go walking to look for life, healing the injuries left by its pains. Nothing can wipe away the memories of the paths you have traveled.
We are in modern China, the immense continent 30 times the size of England, populated by 1.3 billion people. This is the country of the Forbidden City, of the Great Wall, and of the skyscrapers of Hong Kong. But it is not about these places that we want to talk. Ours is the story of a voyage towards remote lands, towards infinite spaces, into the most complete solitude, in search of the second highest peak of the world, the mountain K2, called Chougir Feng by the Chinese.
This world-famous mountain, 8,611 meters in height, rises in the Karakoram Mountains in the northwestern part of the Himalayan chain. It is situated between China and the part of Kashmir which is controlled by Pakistan. The K2 rises as a gigantic, perfect pyramid. Because of this characteristic, the mountaineers consider it the Mountain of Mountains, an incarnation of elegant form and maximum technical difficulty. The 300-kilometer-long mountainous chain that separates the Karakoram Mountains from the Indian plain of the Punjab creates the most arid and rigid climate of this Himalayan region.
Climbing the K2 is much more difficult and strenuous than climbing Mount Everest. As of today, only 298 people, of whom 11 are women, have made it to the peak, a small number compared to the more than 3,000 who have reached the top of Mount Everest. The numerous steep and complicated passages, the extreme cold, and the unpredictable climate with its frequent dangerous snowstorms make the ascent of the mountain the most difficult in the world. The north side, which lies in Chinese territory, is the least explored or visited, because the controlling authorities complicate the way to the peak with bureaucratic obstacles. If we add to this the complete isolation, the difficult logistics, and the risk of flooded river crossings, it's easy to guess why only the boldest adventurers take this path.
The rise along the north edge, 4,000 meters of rock and ice that point steeply to the top, is perhaps one of the most interesting routes in all the Himalayas. The first success in reaching the top of K2 by this route was not until 1982 and required a large Japanese expedition. Before this time, no one had ever succeeded. Recently, in 1992, a new approach was inaugurated, the Northwest Route, which follows the 1982 route for its last leg.
Our way leads us through one of the most unknown and less frequented areas on Earth, which was open to foreigners only recently. The expedition has been extremely difficult from the first to the last day. The strain of the altitude, the monotony, the insufficiency of the food, and the lack of fuel to warm the most frugal dinners at an altitude of 4,000 meters takes their toll. it's impossible to wash oneself with even slightly warm water, and the whole camp must be set up in the dark of night and disassembled in the cold of morning every single day. Frost and wind have also been constant companions on the journey, but each moment has shown us striking beauty, filled our spirits with tranquility, and given us almost mystic experiences.
We fly from Russia to Bishkek, capital of Kyrgyzstan, to depart again in the direction of Kashghar, the ancient caravan city along the legendary Silk Road. Here, another 2-day journey awaits us, the crossing of the mythical Torugart Pass, defined by Lonely Planet as the most difficult frontier of the world. It divides Xinjiang in China and Kyrgyzstan at an altitude of 3,800 meters. Here, the Chinese bureaucracy forces us into a long and aggravating stay before giving us permission to cross.
The ancient city of Kashghar was famous as the biggest commercial city along the Silk Road. A cultural center for the Uyghur people, it has been called the Uyghurs' secret capital. Once adorned with airy wooden houses, Kashghar appeared to be stuck in an earlier time. In recent years, on the excuse of earthquake security, the Chinese authorities have replaced the ancient houses with modern city structures. They have also destroyed large parts of the historic city center, which included a school for Quran scholars dating back to the 11th century. Now, as in ancient times, there is a bazaar filled with spices, fruit, dust, people, and voices. And on Sundays, the cattle market becomes a sea of sheep and goats, oxen and horses. The pulsing and busy life of the city and its people can be felt on any corner and street. We leave again at dawn towards places that gradually become more empty and deserted. The way passes between leaning rocks in the valleys, dug out mercilessly by the river's fury, which, in the flood months, thrashes the embankments. High walls of limestone debris flank our passing between a natural landscape that appears totally alien.
Two high passes wait for us, until in the middle of late evening we arrive at the Chinese checkpoint. The previous script recurs: the most meticulous governmental inspections and more hours of waiting. We must show them our photo and video cameras, of which the authorities scrupulously note the serial numbers. We continue to wait without knowing the reason, until suddenly the situation becomes resolved. Then, in deep darkness, we set up our tents. We have entered a military zone, and we realize that from here on, if anything happens, no one will be able to help us.
The first day of trekking already offers wonders to us. After a few hours of walking, a spectacular canyon opens at our feet, Xinjiang.
The warm colors of the rock that surrounds us make the spectacle serene and joyful. The camels, our faithful companions on the journey, on whom we have loaded luggage, tents, and food, walk fast on the shoal of the river. We can hardly manage to keep up with them. They are Bactrian camels, bigger, stronger, and more unpredictable than their relatives who live in the deserts.
One needs to be an experienced camel driver to lead them. Several times we have climbed on top of the camels and on top of our luggage when crossing the rivers. Deep water is something to be scared of. It would have been impossible to anticipate the journey because, with the melting of the snow, the water in the river has become abundant and reckless, and floods the whole valley, hampering our advancement.
After the second day, we notice that there isn't a living soul anywhere. We seem to have entered another world. Only a few predatory birds circle above us.
We move forward along infinite canyons, which solitary valleys lead into, and then disappear into the void. There is a profound silence that seems to fill our ears. Only the howling of the wind and the sound of the water manage to violate it. Immense walls of sandstone dominate us with a dark appearance, while, in the distance, the snow-clad tops of the mountains make us think of the infinite.
Surprisingly, we see shepherds riding toward us on their donkeys. Now, in autumn, they are moving to the lower valleys.
The branches of the rivers pour in blue and transparent, like lazy snakes sleeping in the sun. The stones at our feet are so beautiful that they seem like fanciful pictures painted by nature. Here and there, the water rivulets pulsate with life, their sound like singing. And at night, the twinkling stars are so numerous that one loses count. And the ethereal Milky Way festively and brightly crosses the sky like a brush of the Creator's hand.
In these places, it's easy to lose track of time, as if the ticking of the clock is no longer of any concern to us, and the world moves farther and farther away.
Each evening, we go through the same ritual. We relieve the camels of their burdens and set up the tents, which at least give some protection against the icy wind. Then we have a basic meal, and already night is catching up with us. But our thoughts do not dwell on the faults of our icy night camp, but on the great new impressions that nature will give us on the next day.
After 5 days of this, we have reached the K2 base camp. However, the mountain is still hidden. To see it, one must go up to the advanced camp and perhaps, with a little bit of luck, the mostly cloud-covered mountain will reveal itself. Unfortunately, the camels cannot continue due to the difficulty of the path as well as the altitude. The organizing agency of our journey had been positive, no problem to provide an experienced guide, and no problem for the transport of the heavy baggage.
But in reality, the guide did not know the way and had neither organizational abilities nor any desire to go further. Meanwhile, the cook and the camel drivers, the only ones to know the way, refused to go into that hell of frost. So, a day of strong pressure and wordy irritation passed. Then, a day later, close to noon, the camel drivers accept the task after being offered much greater compensation. The most willing of the group leave, facing a steep slope, and later, another descent that leads to the foot of the glacier on which the advanced camp is situated.
With increasing altitude, we get ever greater panoramic views over the valley. However, the cold increases, as does the intensity of the icy wind. Our path gets more and more alpine. Rubble and ice are now constantly underfoot, and we have to step with great care to be safe.
Finally, this seemingly endless day is conquered. The most frugal dinner yet, based on thin soups brought from home, is prepared in the open, under the icy wind, using a gas canister and stove. We eat quickly because everything cools down faster than we can speak its name. Then it's time to crawl into our sleeping bags, the single best remedy to the cold up there.
The next day, another surprise. During the night, it has snowed. Much worse, nothing of the mountain is visible. Our dream, to see the K2, the most mythical mountain on Earth with our own eyes, seems to evaporate. We wait and hope with our hearts in suspense. However, the camel drivers prepare the baggage and decide to return. We stall for more time by eating breakfast extremely slowly, until, suddenly and unexpectedly, we see a light passage opening between the clouds. There are the Sherpas to show us the route, and we happily trek behind them, off on an uncertain path.
We hike on, and with wonder, we see human figures coming toward us. They are two famous Kyrgyzstani climbers, fresh from the top. They return, visibly strained from having conquered the terrible North Crest, after a useless attempt to climb the northeast wall, which they abandoned due to the danger of avalanche. They stop with the desire to speak, amazed at finding us up here in this remote place. They encourage us and suggest that we set up our tents at the Italian camp, at about 5,000 meters, where the view of the mountain is better. We arrive in late afternoon through a thick white mass of clouds. Here, another outdoor supper awaits us, by the dim light of the first stars, and then a night below 0 degrees Fahrenheit, or minus 20 Celsius.
There it is, the K2, directly in front of us, so high that it strains the imagination. The jagged ice of the glacier offers the perfect setting to see the mountain with our own eyes. Still, our joy is tempered by the knowledge of where we are. We are standing at the K2 with its turbulences of weather above 5,000 meters, 15,000 feet, and we still face the adventure of the way back.
We are lucky with the weather, and we make the descent to the base camp without problems. All of our impressions of the mountain remain vivid in our hearts. At the base camp, the camels await us. After an ice-cold night, as the saying goes, the caravan moves on.
The extreme rigid ice landscape of the glacier is now only a memory. We have rubble and stones under our feet again, which had already taken away so much of our strength on the way up. Here the camels with their wide hoofs seem to have the advantage over us with our mountaineering shoes. In quiet elegance, they willingly march hour after hour. If our impressions during the hike on the glacier were wild and spectacular, now the calm steps of the camels, cradling us in these lonely valleys, seem to take us into deep meditation. But this is not a Sunday walk. It's an expedition in the Himalayas, and often we are awakened from our daydreams by the ice-cold water in flooded rivers and other unexpected situations.
Finally, we find human settlements again, even if they are just the simple huts of nomads who use them for a few weeks when coming along here with their flocks. At the governmental checkpoint, the usual meticulous inspections of our cameras are awaiting, and now this includes inspection of the videos and the photos we have shot. We are off towards Kashghar to reward ourselves with a long hot shower and a good restaurant meal.
We are back in Kashghar again, and are fortunate to see the celebrations of the end of Ramadan. Dancing seems to be a male-only amusement here, and the music is somehow strange to our ears.
The city is full of different tribes, races, and religions, and the market people and cooks at the eating stalls have lots to do. visit a mosque with a surrounding graveyard. On the inscriptions, we notice that many people died prematurely.
On Sunday, as always, is the cattle market. Here is the meeting place of all the countrymen of the whole region to buy, sell, look, check, talk, and bargain. And for those who are hungry, there are many edible delights on offer. But the journey does not finish here. Awaiting us is still the Mustagata, a fairy tale mountain which rises from the Pamir chain. The road to get there touches the pleasant oasis on the borders of the Taklamakan Desert, and it reaches into a landscape with fantastic rocks filled with veins of the most beautiful colors due to the many materials that have formed them. We arrive after long hours in the coach at the mountain, which is reflected in the blue and quiet Lake Karakoram. In the morning, we hopped on local motorcycles and went to the feet of the forest of ice. The scenery was charming. With astonishment and dread, we advanced between high sails of ice, between towers and cathedrals along which thick, transparent ice candles descended at our feet to a placid, gurgling, clean brook. Above us, the cold ices of the Mustagata glared in the sun. Below in the distance, the view swept towards the desert, which evaporated into the void. It was difficult to leave a place like this. With a heavy heart, we returned to Kashghar, reluctantly following the long road. The setting sun ignited a bright yellow color in the leaves of the trees, which sent flashes of light. The autumn approached with long strides. Finally, our journey neared its end, and with melancholy, we knew it was time to return.